Season 2 of the Strange, Rare, and Peculiar podcast, a place to learn more about homeopathy, deepening your knowledge, expanding your universe of possibility in the world of health and well-being through homeopathy.
Homeo what?
Homeo what?
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening.
And hello.
Hello to you.
And hello to you.
It's
Friday.
It's fall. It's autumn.
Look.
It's the end of summer.
But you know what? If you're listening to this, when I say look, it means nothing. Which, right. But I'm wearing a scarf indoors.
Uh-huh.
Nice. You fixing something on me there?
Yeah.
I'm wearing a scarf indoors, and not because it's cold outside, but because we had the air conditioning on, and it became a meat locker in here. So now I'm dressed like it's winter.
No, it's good. Yeah, it's the passing. It's good to notice the passing of the seasons.
It is, because now it means back to school.
Yeah, it does.
I love that.
Back to school in a week. 10 days.
10 days.
Yeah.
And in between now and then we have graduation. We're gonna have a big party.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing all the food planning. My favorite.
The library's getting sorted out.
Yes, there are boxes. We have donations.
If you could see. Oh my Lord.
We are the Homeo hoarders. I think it is official.
I'm not going to accept that. No, definitely not.
And let's not. So, you know what? We, in the last number of podcasts, well, with the exception of one, I think the last 4 or 5, have been a lot of, I don't know a good word other than mishigas.
Hand-wringing.
Hand-wringing. It's really been a difficult time in the profession, and I'm over it.
You're over it?
I'm over it.
What does that mean?
Well, we have what appears to be a very good solution. And while I think everybody did the best that they could to come to a decision where you get everybody on the same page moving forward, that failed miserably. The CHC has decided to continue on with what they are doing, and so be it.
So we'll do what we do.
Yeah. And
Fantastic.
and actually, here's what I love about it. And then we're going to go on to a totally different topic, because
that's the
guys,
point.
Done.
We want to get back to dusty old
Let's get back to dustiness. But in finishing it up, I think what makes it easy to say we're done is that there's another path, which I love the fact that when you know that you are working in the truth, in the light, and you give it up. Remember a couple of times ago, I ended with a little motivational segment on...
You're referring to your rant.
But this was necessarily a rant. It was basically saying...
That was a rant.
At the end, which was we're just going to be positive about it, and that we're going to do everything we can to affect change. And because we don't know what the best outcome would be, because we're humans thinking with our human mind, we can only perceive the outcome that we can perceive without knowing what lies beyond it. And if we follow with open hearts and our best intentions, we may get through to the other side and find another path that's actually a brighter path than the one that we were on.
Well, we have.
And we have.
I know.
And so, as Carly talked about the last time, the route toward licensure appears to be a really good one. And I know that lots of our colleagues, not lots, I know that some of our colleagues have some, concerns about what does licensure mean and so on and so forth. I have to say that I am of the mindset that while I am definitely of the please don't tell me what to do group, I do have a sense, an innate sense, that for the profession to move forward, everything we do to elevate standards and sort of legitimize will lead us to a place where we may wind up really being integral in a much broader and more profound way within the medical system. But we have to prove ourselves again. Right. So anyway, so that's good. So that's good news. So we can leave that now.
Good. Leave it.
Let's go to something else.
So
yeah.
I reckon we should talk about the basics.
That's what I said this morning. Sorry. Al said to me, what should we talk about? I said, it's back to school time. Let's go back to basics. Let's talk about that. And he said, okay. So this is the thing, right? In a good partnership, you just put it on the table and let it.
I just want to claim I just want to claim some, like some direction. I want to have at least a hand on the steering wheel.
Yeah, I couldn't help it. I'm sorry, but I knew it was going to make
All
me
right.
laugh.
So Denise thinks that what we should do is what Denise thinks, and therefore,
Like I
who
said,
am I
see,
to get in the way of that?
I said, I don't like to be told what to do, right? And so that's why I'm not worried about licensure because anyway, but
It hurts.
that's funny. It does. So we were talking about like what are the basics? Like back to school time is, even for advanced students, even for practitioners, when we actually allow ourselves or require ourselves to go back to the basics, then we remember we don't have to get all fancy.
Well, I would describe it somewhat differently. And that is standing up in front of a classroom of really smart people is a motivator to review your material. And each and every year, and this thing happens to me this time of year. It happened to me yesterday because I did my first clinic in a month.
Yeah.
Student clinic.
Yeah.
And I just, spoke out loud as I do. I just tend to say what I feel. And what I said was, this time of year, I forget how to do this.
Really?
Yeah, and it was, and of course, I ran a really,
You were totally fine.
yeah, totally
Yeah.
great session. But it's the same thing, teaching each and every year. Sometimes the lectures are a little bit different that you're allocated, but
Right.
to teach imagine if you're a homeopathy student, a learner that's just like, full of energy having found this, and then you get a brilliant, well pitched, early lecture on the principle of similars,
Right.
or the single remedy,
Yeah.
or how homeopathy works. And it's just, that sends you, that is a big puff of wind to send you into your study. And the opposite, imagine if, if it lands flat.
Right.
And so therefore that's motivation for me. And so, we're teaching in the first, we're talking about the first semester folks.
Yeah.
But the first.
But people, sorry, I'm interrupting because.
Oh, when's that ever stopped you?
Right. Good point. No. Anyway, I forgot what I was.
Good.
I was gonna. No.
So.
Because a lot of people who've been teaching for a long time say, "Oh, if I ever have to teach sulfur again, oh, if I ever have to teach law of similars again." Da, da, da. I find that teaching. I do too. I love going back to the basics. Because, or just.
It's really challenging.
It is.
And one of the reasons it's challenging is because, and no offense to you folks out there, but students are becoming smarter. Oh my Lord.
Who would you be offending by saying such a thing?
Well, previous students.
Oh, right. Fair enough.
Previous learners.
Or maybe we're becoming dumber.
No, I don't think so. No, I don't actually think so. But I think, when you've taught your, 50th lecture on vital force.
Yeah.
Or totality, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And how do you apply it? Then, you to go back to your dusty notes to pick them up and just go teach is well, it's not what I do. It's not what I do. I prepare.
Yeah.
And I prepare because I never know what those amazing questions are going to be. And it's just, I think in the last 4 or 5 years, the quality, I don't know, maybe it's the quality of question coming from early students is pretty astonishing.
Yeah, I would agree. Last year I did, I had an exercise for myself, because last year was the first year in 4 that I wasn't also a student, right? So I was teaching, but I was also, in my own study. So last year I came back totally fresh and said, okay, I'm going to do the student experience at AHE. So I did all the readings last year as a way to sort of preemptively prepare for the lectures, because I might modify my own lectures or might have modified my own lectures in the past, but maybe not read Robert. I hadn't read Roberts in ages or hadn't read, and so I started to then allow myself to spend time with those materials, rethinking sort of how a student is viewing this information as if new. And it was really engaging for me myself, not necessarily. I mean, I hope it was as a teacher, but one of the things that I was thinking about is just because I had a very interesting experience over the summer that I have been grappling with. I was asked to teach for a new school. Someone reached out to me and said, "Would you like to teach for us? And we'd like you to teach the organon and history." And they were very small segments. It was like a lecture on the organon and a history and I said to you, I'm not sure how I feel about this, just based on how we approach teaching.
I said, "Are you kidding? That's your sweet spot.
Yeah.
Get in there. You want to teach that stuff. You've got the opportunity to influence a whole lot of folks."
And I was like, okay. So I had a meeting and I said, I'm going to listen for 10 minutes before I make a judgment about the program, because it's a lot of newfangled things. And the person that I was meeting with, who couldn't have been nicer, honestly, said something about, everything has changed. Homeopathy, no, actually what she said was, if Hahnemann had lived longer, I'm sure homeopathy would have been a totally different thing. And I felt this sinking in my stomach. And I didn't make it to 4 minutes without saying, I can't teach for you. Or actually what I said was, you don't want me. I didn't make it to 4 minutes. I was timing, because I said, I'm going to do my best to actively listen and not make a judgment, because I looked at the website and I looked at like what their focus was. And I'm not judging, not at all, but I knew I'm judging myself. And I said, you don't want me, because I'm kind of a bit of a purist about it. And here's why.
I'll translate that, a hard ass. Okay.
Thank you. No. But I think because it's out of respect for Hahnemann and what he was able to do. And this is why when we talk about going back to basics, this is where I want to start. Homeopathy is based on the laws of the universe. And the laws of the universe do not change ever. Mm-hmm. Lots of other things change, but the laws of the universe don't change. Would you say that that's a true statement? Full stop?
Yeah, you want to explain somewhat what you mean by the laws of the universe.
Sun rises, sun sets.
Well, that's empiricism. And that's debatable as well.
But the sun rises and sets?
Well, the sun rose this morning. Right. There's no guarantee it's going to rise tomorrow.
That's nihilism.
No, it's not. It's just Bertrand Russell's inductivist turkey's problem.
Okay, fair enough.
Do you know the story?
I don't know the story about the inductive turkey, but...
Let me tell you the story.
Please do.
So Bertrand Russell, English philosopher, and if you spend a bit of time on YouTube, have a look at him, because there's a whole lot of kind of grainy yet high quality BBC.
You do your BBC voice?
Yes, dialogues with Bertrand Russell in I would say the early 60s, when he was in his 80s. And he's an English philosopher, and he's famous from a number of things, including his inductivist turkey. So if I said to you, is the sun going to come up tomorrow, what would you say?
Well, now that I know,
I
would say, well, based on everything that we know, it has come up for the last, millennia. Therefore,
no, just yes or no.
Yes.
Okay, and then the next question is, on what basis do you make that statement?
Based on
because it came out tomorrow.
Exactly.
That's exactly it. But if you asked a turkey that same question, there's a problem with Thanksgiving, right?
You're going to have to keep going on this one? No.
Well, no, there's a problem, because if you ask the turkey, is the sun going to come up? Yeah, it's certainly the case until the 26th of November, or whatever the date is.
The turkey's going to be dead.
Yeah, exactly. And so to base knowledge on experience has an inherent flaw, depending on your position. It's a really interesting philosophical kind of discussion. It's a philosophical discussion, but nevertheless, it's the problem with empiricism as opposed to rationalism.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now what do I do about this conversation we were going to have?
Because you asked me what I mean by universal law.
Sure.
And so, universal laws, if you mean that stronger similars annihilate weaker similars, then I totally agree with you.
Sure. And so the foundational principles of homeopathy are, all you have to do is look at Hahnemann's intention we get from aphorism 1, right? And I'm using the Wenda O'Reilly edition here. And I know, there are a couple good translations of the 6th edition. I use the Wenda, I'm just being clear, I use Wenda's translation because we use it for students. And the reason that we use it for students, in addition to other primary source materials is because I feel like it's built for students and their understanding because of the glossary and the little sidebars.
Mhm.
Just, because we're talking primary sources a lot these days.
Nice.
So anyway, aphorism 1. So I'm just going to read the Wenda translation. The physician's highest and only calling is to make the sick healthy, to cure, as it is called.
Mhm.
When we do this in our first session, I show a few different translations of that aphorism 1.
Yeah, because the best translation is the physician's high and only mission is
Exactly.
to restore the sick to health.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And does that one say as it is called?
as it is termed.
As it is termed, that's right. Anyway, but what doesn't change much is the footnote.
Right.
Because aphorism 1 is, basically you can look at it and say this is the intention, right? Is to cure the sick, capital C, cure. And when Hahnemann says cure, right? When we say cure, it's a lot different than the sort of colloquial definition of cure, because Hahnemann means remove susceptibility. Cure is to remove the root of disease, not palliation of symptoms. Anyway, but the most important part of aphorism 1 really is the footnote, because what he's talking about is contextualized in the footnote, which is based on how there are systems of medicine that have come and gone throughout the ages that were based on assumptions that just didn't pan out. And so over the course of medical history, the foundational principles on which medicine was based were constantly changing. And Hahnemann is saying
Totally.
you cannot fall for these sort of fallacies in medicine. So aphorism 1, while we like to talk about it as this lofty ideal, and in one of the lectures, I have students go around and read it, right? And we read it in the different translations, and it's like this thing that makes us feel like, okay, we're set. It's like a way to launch the academic year, just in the way that it launches the organism. But at the end of the day, Hahnemann is basically saying, that he says the physician's calling is not to make countless attempts at explanation regarding disease appearances and their proximate cause, right? Which becomes super important by the time you get into germ theory, when causation takes over everything. Hahnemann's saying that's not what this is about. The true cause will always remain concealed. Yeah. He says, of such learned fanaticism to which the name theoretical medicinal art is given and for which special professorships are instituted, we've had quite enough.
Enough,
he says, with a German accent.
Ja, das stimmt, ja.
Yeah. It is high time for all those who call themselves physicians once and for all to stop deceiving suffering humanity with idle talk and to begin now to act, that is to really help and to cure.
What I would actually say is stop talking, let's get to work.
Yeah.
We've got work to do. Pens down. Well, in the classroom, pens up. But
oh my gosh, I thought you said pants down. I was like,
no, that's my accent.
Sorry. But I'm used to your accent by now.
Rajan made fun of me once. He said,
about Rajan Sankaran.
He said, what do you say in New Zealand when you see someone on the street? I says, "G'day," and he took that and
went with it
and really went with it. Good day or whatever he did.
He's quite funny. I think we've talked about this on the podcast before, but when we were at a dinner and you and Rajan and Kim Aaliyah started one-upsmanship on jokes, I laughed so hard my belly hurt for days. You three are so good. Anyway, coming back to this. So this going back to basics, right? Going back to this foundational premise in homeopathy, Hahnemann is saying, we're not playing here. Right? This is a system that is irrefutable. Yeah. He says, I sought truth earnestly and found it. That's really different than, here's a system. Here's a system. You got Flogstrom and you've got system, you've got the balance of the elements, you've got the this, the that, the other thing. Hahnemann is saying, no, actually, there is one truth to healing, and it's what makes the world go round, regardless of whether or not the turkey wakes up on the 20 whatever of November. Right? Okay.
Can I ask you a question?
You might as well.
Imagine that Hahnemann had got over his pneumonia.
Right.
And he lives to 95.
I think he might have, but anyway.
Written a 7th?
Oh,
The seventh edition.
right. He very well may have, but that does not satisfy me in terms of what others are saying, the reason that they stray so far from Hahnemannian principles. Because if you look at the different, so over the summer, I have been going through the fifth and the sixth editions of the Organon and looking at every change and the different words, just comparing two translations. And
Do you know some people just go to the beach in the summer?
I did that at the beach. I sound like so nerdy. I mean, I'm not that nerdy.
Anyway, over the summer.
Yeah. But anyway, because it's really, and like sometimes I hear myself talk and I think, who am I?
Yeah. I think a number of people think that, but it's a really lovely thought. It's very compelling.
Which part?
All of it.
Oh. Anyway, but the thing is that between the fifth and the sixth edition of the Organon, actually from the beginning until here, no, from the third sort of onward, fourth onward, chronic diseases onward, the changes got smaller and smaller and smaller. So the biggest jump in philosophy was the addition of chronic diseases and then some refinements there.
Mm-hmm.
The changes that were really happening between the fourth and the sixth editions were refinements in the delivery of the medicine and the dynamization.
That's purely it.
Yeah.
To make it land more seamlessly and easily for the client.
Yeah, exactly. To mitigate quote unquote aggravation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so do I think that Hahnemann would have made a big change? No. And I think what's interesting is, and I really feel bad because I literally had an hour meeting scheduled with that woman, and 4 minutes in, I'm like, you don't want me. And it was just like, no, I mean, I need to write her a card.
Yeah, you do. I
do, because I feel really badly, because it's not my job to say to people, you should be thinking of homeopathy a different way. Like you do you. But I can't do that, because I don't think that the implemented changes from the core values, philosophical values of homeopathy, those haven't changed. The implementation of chronic, how to solve chronic diseases, that was a big leap. But then it's the delivery of the medicines. But what was interesting to me, not interesting, what made me say I just can't do it, is that a lot of the newfangled homeopathy is based on bioreductionistic theories. I
have to say I agree. We're in an extraordinary old time, because you're the expert on when I say mid-century, we're talking mid-19th century.
Yeah.
Right. So that after Hahnemann dies, 1843, that's in the sweet spot for chemistry. Totally. Microbiology, bacteriology.
100%.
Yeah, that's where all of the developments in science, through really the developments of the microscope, technology-led changes, mean that all disciplines, including homeopathy, have to take stock and start thinking and evolving or not evolving, depending on what's going on. So, and Hahnemann lived through the first phase of that. So it's not like Hahnemann didn't know that. And indeed, Hahnemann understood transmissible diseases. I mean, you look at one of his earliest essays on epidemics, which is it's a riff on Hippocrates. Yeah. And when Hahnemann's talking about epidemics, he actually invented social distancing. He says, if someone has a disease and they're coughing and this disease is spreading, walk on the other side of the street. Don't go into their house. Wash the linens. Put air, if there's a straw mattress. He's talking about what to do when you've got people in confined quarters, like in a prison, or, there weren't really hospitals then. There were places of, cramped convalescence, but there weren't the hospitals then in the times he was, because that essay was, I don't know the exact date, but it's in lesser writings, but it would have been before the first Organon, I think. Yeah. So this is when he was still working on principles of hygiene. Yeah. Can I tell you about my summer?
Bit of a leap, but yes.
So firstly, I discovered Audible. You know that.
I guess I do.
Yeah. And so, folks, I've discovered Audible.
Audible being it's the subscription service for audiobooks.
So I've got through, I think, 10 novels in this summer, but listening to them all and listening to every word, it's a really different experience.
Because these are books that you've already read. It's a series you've read a few times.
Well, I've read 2 books on Alexander the Great.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But I'm on my 8th book of Aubrey. and Maturin, and these are books set in the Royal Navy from 1798, which is when the first one is set, through to it's following Napoleon.
Yeah.
And at the moment, I'm in about 1813. I think I'm in 1813. So, Hahnemann's alive. When you think about 1813, he's living in Leipzig, right? And he's just starting working at the university. But what I'm reading is Maturin, who's the Navy surgeon. And he is very, very advanced in all sorts of ways. He is talking, the author doesn't use homeopathic language or totality of symptoms, but he is a holistic thinker. He's a true natural philosopher, as you would describe. But he's also, after the French and the British are like going side by side and cannoning the hell out of each other's warships, he's sawing off the legs of, men that have been crippled.
Right.
And then saying to his surgeons, mate, here, pass me that saw. I need to go to this one here. And the point that I'm making is that with a very, very primitive understanding of hygiene and microbiology and the ideas around cleanliness, I think surgical cleanliness are really
so the impetus for cleanliness and surgical procedures came about because sepsis, of course, when you open up a body cavity and bacteria gets in, then sepsis comes. What's interesting is that part of the healing process in the pre-antibiotic age, it was considered a standard part of the healing process to have what was termed laudable pus. So in other words, pus, which is the byproduct of infection, was considered to be a standard issue.
Good.
Right?
Exactly.
And it wasn't until, homeopaths understood this because, believe it or not, homeopaths were also surgeons back at that time. In that time, surgery, of course, performed when it was necessary. But there were homeopaths during the antiseptic age, right? When they were using not hydrochloric acid, they were using carbolic acid. Carbolic acid was used with a puffer, like the way you would use like a bellows for a fireplace. They would use that.
There would be a puffer in the surgery room.
And they would have, the person was called the puffer, and they had.
Serious?
Yeah, they called them a puffer, and they like. Oh no, I thought you got this from one of your books. And they would use that thing to dispense carbolic acid into the abdominal cavity to sanitize it. And of course, speaking of anesthetizing, so once anesthesia was consistent enough, it meant that they could keep people under for longer, which meant they could keep the body cavity open for longer. And of course, because investigation of live body parts was not really, other than during the 3rd century AD, that was, verboten, no looking inside the body. And so once they were able to do that and keep people alive consistently, what happened was you then had an increase in the number of infections, right? Because the longer you keep the body open, the greater the likelihood of infection. Anyway, going forward, why did we get there roundabout from?
Because I was telling you about my summer.
Yeah, your summer, your books. You haven't, the different this time with these books is that you haven't talked like in sea shanties like you used to. The last time when you read all these books, you spoke like a sailor for quite some time.
I can turn it on if you want to, but the language at the time,
unbelievable.
It
is.
is.
Say curse like a sailor.
Yeah,
There's a reason. Anyway,
I can do it if you want.
All right, we only have 10 more minutes before our next meeting.
I come with a sharp knife and a clear conscience.
You were singing the songs. Anyway, let's next time. But we're just going to go back to basics, right? And so I was thinking about this because one of the conversations that comes up so much in homeopathy is around what would Hahnemann have done if he had lived longer, right? So the precursor to the title of most of the lectures I give is what would Hahnemann do? And then I state the problem. Right?
Yeah, to my mind, just to reiterate, I think you're right, actually, because the differences became less and less and only related to the way that the remedy landed with the client. So that's probably the 7th and possibly the 8th, unless there was some miraculous and relevant technological advance which would have, taken them in a different direction.
Possibly.
I can't imagine what it would be.
I mean, I can't either because, it would be immortality, which, of course, when you said if Hahnemann had gotten over his lung issue, maybe he would have lived longer. And of course, if you're interested.
Well, when you think about it, the direction that folks went it really relates to 2 people. Herring,
Yeah.
who described himself as a scientific homeopath,
Yeah.
and Burnett. They both
Right.
described themselves as true scientific homeopaths.
Well, and Herring, it wasn't that Herring called himself a scientific homeopath. It was that Herring said, Burnett did. Yeah. And if you're interested in Compton Burnett, go back. We've actually done a few things on Burnett. Yeah. We did. Remember, we went and we read the cases, the woman with the woman who was had the skin issue that got suppressed, and then she was unable to conceive. Anyway, but come forward to Herring. But it's interesting because Herring is who I studied, Herring and Lippe, and that was during 19th century homeopathy. And their argument was about science, which of course takes you to the philological discussion of science and what is the definition of science. And they were at great pains to agree on that, because to Herring, I think Herring, I talk about the red herring a lot. He really led us in the wrong direction, because his quote unquote scientific speak was all about these newfangled discoveries. And he said, and I think he's correct in this, where he said, I'm paraphrasing here because I haven't read that quote in a little bit, but he said in a long letter to to Lippe, but also it said in the preface to the third American edition of the Organon. He says about unless homeopaths really stay with the science of the times, then they're going to be considered quacks. Yeah. And so he says, and Herring then says Hahnemann would have agreed. And he says Herring doesn't rely on anything that Hahnemann said. It's all about empiricism, and that Hahnemann would basically be happy that that's what he's doing, because it's all about whether or not it works.
Yeah.
There are some troubles with that,
because
and Hahnemann directly refuted Herring. Unfortunately, there's no Twitter, there's no X back then. So by the time Hahnemann would have given his formal refute to Herring, and I wonder if there was ever any communication, any letter. I've never seen it. And I've gone through, if anybody knows if there was ever a letter that Hahnemann, or any exchange between Hahnemann and Herring in particular about the remedy Sorinum. I know I've seen one communication, but Hahnemann says in the footnote, now I'm going from memory, footnote to Aphorism 56, where Hahnemann's talking about isopathy, and he very directly refutes Herring's ideas that are isopathic in nature. In other words, this idea that there's a germ and you give the same germ. I'm using the term germ. That Hahnemann had a few things he would have, like morbific agent is what Hahnemann likely would have said. But to give the same to solve a problem isn't going to work. He says nothing but calamity will result.
The Herring's one direction, and the second direction is kind of anti-Herring, and that's the direction that Ken took homeopathy.
Yes.
But nevertheless, they're both still recognizable as homeopathy. That was the point that I was going to make.
Oh, good.
And taking us back to, I think, where we started losing our direction in this conversation, but still I'm bringing it back. And that is that so much modern homeopathy is conventional medicine dressed up. It is.
Oh, totally. It's greenwashed.
It's allopathic. And I find it extraordinary that when medicine, when you talk to integrative medicine folks, and you hear about the openness with which they look at herbal medicine, naturopathic medicine, homeopathic medicine options, they're living within the paradigm, their own, but still looking outside and with respect to a broader understanding of the patient, and the reason for the problem. In one corner of homeopathy, it's going backwards to a day and an age which has long been left behind by allopathic medicine. It's almost like what are people doing?
I know.
I really don't get it. And it's like, there's Staphylococcus, so let's give the nosode, or there's cytomegalovirus, so let's give the nosode. It's just like
plague.
Let's give plague. Plague. So instead of, how about taking the case?
Yeah. Taking the case and looking at the symptoms. So along those lines.
Talk about basics.
Right, because we want to get to the basics. And so what I want to end on then is homeopathy based on the laws of the universe, right? And there are a couple. So if we're going to, so welcome back to our podcast where we ramble on about homeopathic philosophy and the things we love and just engaging, getting our brains going in grappling with the future of this medicine, right? All right. So we're back on the horse, man.
Stronger similar.
Foundational principle of homeopathy is about the law of similars and the stronger similar. And so if you're struggling with how to sort of see this in a poetic way.
A poetic way?
Yeah.
All right.
The footnote to aphorism 26. So Hahnemann says in aphorism 26, he says, in the living organism, a weaker dynamic affection is permanently extinguished by a stronger one if the stronger one, while differing from it as to mode, is very similar to the weaker one in its manifestation. And you're like,
y'all. Wait, what? Oh, homeopathy works by applying a stronger similar.
And so Hahnemann gives us some examples.
What are the examples?
I love the first one. How can luminous Jupiter disappear in the early morning from the optic nerve of the beholder? Jupiter vanishes from sight because the optic nerve is acted upon by a stronger, very similar, impinging potence, the brightness of the breaking day. So isn't that beautiful? In other words, you're up early before the sun. It's not you.
No, not me.
No. But I was already out on a run this morning watching the sun come up. And if Jupiter were visible in the night sky, as the sun came up and that light was brighter than Jupiter, which would only be evident against the darkness of the sky, Jupiter would disappear. It's a stronger similar.
Any other examples?
Yeah, this one I like. I call this the toilet spray.
Oh.
But you go in or you light a match, right? I grew up with two boys. I had boys. I'm a boy mom. I know this. How does one effectively placate olfactory nerves that have been insulted by foul odors? See what I mean? A bad poop smell. By snuff, which seizes the sense of smell in a similar but stronger way. Neither music nor pastries can cure this olfactory disgust because they relate to other senses. So if you go into a stinky place, because I don't do bad smells. Don't like a bad smell. You're not going to get a bad smell better by playing music. You are not going to get a bad smell better by eating a pastry. I just find that kind of gross. Right?
Can I read one?
Yeah, one more and then we have to go.
How did the cunning warrior drown out the piteous cries of wounded soldiers from the ears of compassionate bystanders? Why? By the high-pitched sounds of the fife paired with a noisy drum roll. Why do they have a drum in battle? Yeah. How did he cover the distant thunder of the enemy's cannon, which aroused fear in the army? By the deep, reverberating boom of the great drum. He could not have obtained such results by reprimanding the regiment or distributing glittering uniforms.
I love it. Okay, wait. There's just one more. I won't read the whole one, but it's the final one, the one about the Germans. Yeah, here it says, a people like the Germans, who for centuries were gradually more and more degraded into will-less apathy and subservient sense of slavery, first had to be still more deeply trodden into the dust by the conqueror from the West, Napoleon, until the situation became intolerable. Only in this way was their self-disparagement overtuned and lifted so that they felt their human dignity again and raised their heads for the first time as German men. Mm-hmm. I love that. And it reminds me of a quick example, which was Veronica, who worked with us for years. She had two cats. She lived in Brooklyn. She had these two cats that fought with each other constantly. She had to have a baby gate in her apartment to keep them separate. I just can't imagine living in an apartment in New York City and having to keep two cats separate. It was like a full-time job. Anyway, she moved and she drove her cats cross country in a car. And the trauma of that drive for both of them was a stronger similar that they both experienced. And they got out of the car and lived happily ever after.
La, la,
how about that? I know.
That's beautiful.
That's it. All right, we're back on the horse, people. We are back to the basics. And we'll do it again.
Nice.
Next time, because I've been back in primary sources getting ready for the collaborative conference.
We will see you next week. My guess is that our blood pressure is going to be somewhat higher.
Why? Because it's graduation weekend.
Yeah.
Yes, we're going to be prepping for it.
There's a lot to do.
150 people descending upon. Are you getting the bouncy house?
I've not.
I think you should get the bouncy house. Let's vote. Bouncy house? I love a bouncy house. All right, people.
See ya.
See you next time.
A collaborative homeopathic conference is happening September 20th through 22nd at Sonoran University in Tempe, Arizona. This is a project of the American Institute of Homeopathy, the Homeopathic Academy of Naturopathic Physicians, the Homeopathic Nurses Association, and the Academy of Veterinary Homeopathy. Titled Returning to Our Roots, this conference will focus on utilizing primary homeopathy sources to apply Hahnemann's methodology for consistently exceptional clinical outcomes. You can purchase tickets or learn more about the conference at homeopathyyusa.org. Denise Straiges is excited to be speaking at this conference, and we hope to see you there.